Hello and welcome to my review for episode 1 of Green Planet, which is called Tropical Worlds. So Green Planet is a series that came out in 2022, and as you'd expect, it deals with plants. So obviously most of these series deal with animals, but plants are ultimately just as interesting. They have the same kind of battles, but just on a much slower scale, and because we've got the technology to explore that, we can see it in its kind of full epicness. Obviously, while I'm more interested in animals, I do find plants quite interesting. I think one of the best series Amber ever did was The Private Life of Plants, which this is kind of a more updated version of. So I think there's definitely a scope for more of these kind of series. But this episode opens up with Attenborough, who has a bit more of a presenter role in this, which you'd kind of expect because there isn't as many animals to kind of focus on. There's not as much moving around. Because most of the subjects are stationary, it makes more sense to have a presenter in the background. I think that kind of works for here. But we see Attenborough in the rainforest talking about how the tropical forests are the most diverse habitats on Earth, not just for animals but for plants as well. And the first major sequence we get is the thing about this series that I think works the best, which is showing the battles between the different plants. We see what happens when a tree falls in the forest and all the other plants have got to battle for sunlight so they can be the tree that ultimately replaces that one. And it's really cool watching the different plants that emerge to try and take over that role. The vines are especially interesting because they're kind of the baddies in these sequence. They do kind of make heroes and villains out of the different plants, which I think would annoy me more if it was animals, but because it's plants, you do kind of need to add personality to them. So I don't really mind that they do that. And we see the tactics they use by basically hooking on to other plants and basically exploiting them to haul themselves up to get as much light as they can. And the balsa are kind of the main heroes of the story, and they're the ones that ultimately triumph. And we see the vines basically going for them, but they've got these hairs on their leaves that are able to fend off the vines. It's really cool. I think that sequence was great, to be honest. I remember the first time I watched that thinking it was really, really cool. It was actually shorter, but it's actually a really good sequence, and I think there's a few more of those in the series. This is one of the best ones, if not the best, though, I think, from memory. And then we see more epic sweeping shots of the forest canopy. Great stuff. We talk about photosynthesis. I think they do a good job of talking about things that we kind of all know about plants. If you did biology at school, you know about photosynthesis, but it's really cool having the technology to see how it actually works. That was really cool. I really like that. And we talk about the battle between animals and plants, which is really important because I think as ultimately, as much as I think plants are great, you do kind of need animals in there to kind of engage the average viewer, I think. And they talked about how the main enemy of the plants in this particular situation is actually a type of fungus, which is being harvested by leafcutter ants. But again, here adding personality to inanimate objects, the fungus is portrayed as a proper big baddie that's exploiting the leafcutter ants to do its bidding, because they basically go out and harvest all these leaves to bring back to the fungus. And we see that the fungus is really able to expand through using these ants. A lot of the soil is cleared away. That's really interesting, really cool. It added a new dimension, because I think we all know about leafcutter ants and they're really impressive, but I think actually showing it from the fungus's perspective was actually really interesting and really cool, so I actually really liked that. And it was interesting seeing how the plants combat that, because they're able to flood their leaves with poison, which actually hurts the fungus. The ants realise this, so they've then got to change which plant they're going after. It shows you how this arms race ultimately creates quite a cohesive ecosystem. I thought that was really interesting as well. Really cool part of the episode. The filmmaking there was great as well. Then we go back to the balsa. In order for them to grow so quickly, their trunks are comparatively hollow compared to a lot of other trees. And we see that they're pollinated by kinkajous. So kinkajous are an animal that you don't see at all. And because of that, I've never really been able to really assess them. They look pretty weird. You know, there's not an animal they really look too much like. Ambra says they're a bit like raccoons. They're in the carnivora order, but I don't think they're really like any of them. They look more like lemurs, to be honest. But it was really interesting. It was just cool seeing them pollinate. There's a few good pollination sequences here, and there will be more in later episodes. And then we go to Asia and we see the rafflesia. The rafflesia is the largest flower in the world. It looks like a dead animal. The really close-up shots of the flower really highlight that. You really see all the individual parts of it. They look pretty much like a corpse. It also stinks to high heaven of dead flesh, which attracts a lot of flies. Really interesting stuff. They actually make the rafflesia sound like a proper baddie. We do highlight that it's exploiting a nearby liana, and we see it basically dying around it, which is interesting. They made it seem very ominous. And then just really creepy. I quite like that sequence as well. The rafflesia, again, it's the largest flower in the world, so it kind of makes sense to talk about it in a series all about plants. Very unsettling, pretty cool, and yeah, it was just a good sequence, I thought. And then we talk about how plants are able to spread their seeds. We talk about dipterocarps, also in Southeast Asia, and we see that they've got all these seeds, and there's a lot of animals out there that want to eat them, particularly forest pigs, and they produce so many seeds that while the majority probably do get eaten, enough of them are able to survive and grow. It was a good plant to talk about. I think dipterocarps are probably one of the more well-known rainforest trees, I think, which doesn't say very much because most people couldn't name you any rainforest trees. But I'd heard of dipterocarps before, so you know it was cool to see them. I was like, oh, I've heard of that. but I didn't really know much more about them really, so that was interesting, I thought. And then we go to Australia, and we see the poison arrow tree, which is interesting because we see it's a massive haven for these starlings. However, because there's so many birds there, their droppings are actually poisoning the ground around, and because the tree's absorbing the surrounding nutrients, they're actually slowly killing the tree. And when it goes, we're able to see other plants emerge and try and take its place, kind of like how we saw in the start, but not quite as epic. It kind of continued to show you the negative arms race between animals and plants, even when the animals are ultimately creating a negative situation for themselves. And we talk about fungi, how fungi can be so devastating to trees. I mean, I find fungi pretty disgusting, to be honest with you. I find like things like the cordyceps sequence in Planet Earth is, pretty unsettling. And the fact that the fungus looks so creepy helps emphasize that, I think. So that was pretty good as well. The different types of fungus was cool as well. The chimpanzee fire, the really bioluminescent stuff, really interesting to see. And it was interesting seeing all these spores go through the forest, and it made them out to be a really malevolent force. But ultimately, there are positives. We see them getting trapped in the rain, and that kind of adds to the nutrients that comes from that. And we kind of end in a more negative way, talking about deforestation and more about fragmentation, how the forest was obviously so vast. Now there's just kind of pockets, and it's very rare to find a patch of forest that isn't somewhere near human habitation, or at least some sort of human development, whether that be a road or something. Quite depressing stuff. All the palm oil as well. I mean, palm oil plantations just kind of look very eerie in these series, I think, because we know the deforestation that's going on, how devastating they are. And there is a sort of segue in there where we see the 7-hour flower, which, as well as rhyming, is kind of weirdly placed in here. It's a good sequence. I really liked it. It's this flower that's only open for 7 hours, and it's only pollinated by this one species of bat. And because the nectar's not got that much nutrients, the bat has to feed off a massive variety of these flowers, which helps their pollination. Interesting stuff. Weird placement, but, it works. And then we kind of end going back to the point we were talking about, which was reforestation, where Attenborough visits an area that he was 30 years ago, and it was all farmland. However, they managed to chuck out all the cows, and it's basically recovered. And that's really cool. It kind of adds an air of hope. This episode could have very well ended in a depressing way. It doesn't. I like that. And then we get the diaries. It's all about the people filming the plants. We see them using this new camera operating system, the Triffid they call it, which is, quite funny. And we see these guys getting really into time-lapse filming and actually going out into the wilderness to actually film this stuff, whether they would usually film it in a studio. Most of prevalently for plants, that kind of stuff was filmed in a studio. It's cool here to show them actually doing it in the wild. It shows them filming the ants for a little bit, and it's fun. And you got the sense that these guys weren't really used to filming in the wild, which was quite funny as well. Added a new layer to it. So yeah, I thought that was pretty good as well. So yeah, this episode is really good. It's a good way of opening the series. I think it's probably the best episode of the series, if memory serves, if not the top two anyway. I think the highlights for me was the sort of battle for light at the start, but Rafflesia was good. The Dipterocarps were cool. I like the 7-hour flower. There's loads of stuff in it that's pretty good. So yeah, it's a pretty good episode. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this episode. What were your highlights? Let me know. And yeah, I'll be doing the next one next week, which is all about water, I believe. So look forward to that. And as ever, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to. It's perfectly fine. And I'll see you next time, and goodbye.